Hi, my name is Colin Fain. I'm the CEO of Agronometrics, and today we're going to do a quick tour of the data that we have for Chile in the global trade data. This is actually was brought up by a customer of ours, and they wanted to better understand the Chilean data and how it compares to all of the noise that we've been making about the Peruvian data in the system. Um, so we can go through what's available in the global trade data service. The dashboard by default, we make it monthly. So you can see the monthly data is available. And Chile and Peru are actually the only data sets in the service that we make available both, or that are made available really daily. So we can actually look at this weekly, and we will here in a little bit. So we can see what the Chilean data look like over the last 18 months, so a year and a half. That allows us to capture the entire last season as well as the beginning of this one. We have the last 10 years, and this has been really interesting. Chile was the largest exporter of blueberries in the world a couple of years ago. They got taken over by Peru, that has just had massive growth for a lot of reasons that we've covered before or we will cover further in the future. As really a consequence of Peru's coming onto the market, as well as Mexico. So Chile's kind of saddled by two clients. We can see in the annual graph that the biggest export, the biggest customer for Chilean fruit is the United States. 10 years ago, they were massive. It was 60% of the exports. Today, not so much, but still around 50% of the exports. Like it's a pretty important customer. They've since diversified a lot more. You see a lot more fruit going into the Netherlands down here. But in the US, their biggest market, they're kind of shouldered on one side by Peru and the rapid growth that we've seen there, bringing down the prices that Chile used to enjoy at the beginning of the season. So that would be right around here in October, November, December. And then on the other side, they're kind of seeing the same thing by Mexico, at least in their biggest market. In Europe, it's also a similar issue. You're seeing that competition coming up from Morocco and Spain. But Mexico's making a big impact in the Chilean later season. They're coming on with new varieties. The fruit's much closer to the market. And Chile isn't as competitive as it used to be, especially considering that there used to not be anybody. The shoulders were empty. So you just used to see massive prices in the off season that isn't a reality anymore. We saw big prices this year, but that shouldn't be expected on. And there's been a lot of videos and articles and a lot of commentary that's been made on that. So we're going to look at Chile season, how it's evolved because of this market dynamic and kind of where it's going. So as a result of it being kind of put under strain on both sides of their season, you see this decrease in annual exports. That's taken more and more of an impact over the last couple of years. There's obviously also weather issues that should be accounted for in here, but there is a very big structural shift that's happening because of the onboarding of Peru and Mexico to a great extent. We're seeing this more than anything at the beginning of the season. So it used to be those early producers that had particularly high production costs. They produced in the north of Chile, which is otherwise a desert. And those high production costs that similar to Florida's production, if you want to take the US comparison, those high production costs weren't as competitive versus the other producing regions that came online. So what we're seeing is a shift away from the early season and they focus more on the meat and potatoes of the season where Chile is most efficient and where they're able to outproduce the competition, basically. So that's going to be January and February, and that's relevant to this year. And we're gonna go into that in a bit. Another really useful data point that is made available through the global trade data is pricing. So when you look at other Chilean export data, and there is other data, it exists, especially through the Export Association and other private providers that are associated with the Export Association in Chile. They'll actually have more timely information that we do, but they're only looking at volumes. So they get the export declarations from the sanitary service in Chile, and that's the information that they're able to pass on to their membership or otherwise. We're getting this data straight from the Border Control Authority, and this gives us the declared value, which allows us to see pricing. And this is a really interesting data point because you start to see patterns, you start to see trends, and you can compare how this year is evolving. And we're gonna zoom in on it because it's got this tail that really kind of distorts things. And you get to compare how this year is going with other years. So Chile at the beginning of the season has typically seen higher pricing. Peru was absent in September, October. So we saw really high prices, considerably higher than we've seen before. And we're seeing that trend maintain, which is similar to other pricing that we've seen in the market, be it in the US or in Peru, in Europe, or otherwise. Finally, we have the value of the exports. This is basically, it's the declared value at export. This can be updated in time. So the values that we have, for example, for December might not be the last values that are ultimately declared, but it gives you an idea of how much money is coming back into the system, into the ecosystem per se. So, and what we can see this from this year is that at least in December, Chile has been losing ground consistently since 2018. I mean, every single year is seeing less and less value afforded for the crop, for the production. And this year doesn't stand out particularly. And this is part of the reason, again, that extra pressure that's coming in on both shoulders. That's part of the reason why we're seeing less and less volume, which is up here on this chart at the beginning of the season. So we're going to go to zoom in on this volume chart. And the way that we zoom in, I kind of got ahead of myself. The way that we zoom in is we can click on this chart link. So you click on the chart link, it takes you to this chart. And I already have this all set up so I don't get confused while I'm putting together the video. And here you get to see it in a little bit more detail. But we said before that the Chilean data, we have it daily. So we can look at this weekly, which is kind of what the industry works on. And so we're going to do that. We're going to go to period, look at it weekly, and I got that set up. So this is what Chilean exports look like. In several videos that I made before, we looked at the Peruvian data and how it helped forecast what's going on in the US. The Chilean data is reported by the Export Authority. The Export Authority only releases the data 1 month late. So we just got this week the end of the year. So everything is up to date through the last week of the year. And we're going to have to wait another month until we get all of January. This is actually one of the better reporting countries. Many others report much later. So we have to work with what we have. Unfortunately, the Chilean data isn't as useful for predicting because these 4 weeks that are missing is kind of the time that the fruit spends on the water. So I have this pulled up. This is from the USDA data set. And here we can see what the US arrivals from Chile look like. And we're going to clean this up a bit. And we're going to compare the last 2 years. And so this is the fruit that's already arriving. And the exports that we're seeing don't seem to be that advanced. So we're not actually able to forecast anything. We're pretty close. We're maybe like a week or two back, but a week or two back in our industry is hard. There are ways to kind of make up this difference and fill in these blank spots. Um, it's a lot of data wrangling to get to that point, and that's coming. When we do have that available, I assure you, I will let everybody know. But in the meantime, what we have is the best information publicly available, and that's what we're making available through the system. What's not available from other sources, for example, is the pricing. So if you want to compare this one to one with what we just saw as the imports, we can go to, all right, so this is where we were. I know I'm jumping around a lot and all these charts look really similar. But so here's the Chile exports. We're going to go to the partner and we're going to go down to United States, which I already have here. There, United States. All right, so what I wanted to do was compare the exports of Chile from going to the United States this year to what's arriving in the US from Chile now. Um, there's a lot of reasons why these can shift and be different. What we're seeing is this data that we have available that has been recently released by the Export Authority might be delayed. What it does give us is, again, the pricing, and the pricing gives us insights into how the Chilean exporters are living the reality of their season. So here we've got the weekly data, and we saw at the beginning they were seeing pretty good pricing. I mean, especially we clean this up a bit. These are the Chilean exports to the US, and we're seeing week 47. Right? That's $3 or more than $3 up on the previous year. Then it starts narrowing until we get to the end of the year and these start being rather close to each other. What we're seeing in the US in pricing is that the gap is narrowing more and more to what we saw last year. And I believe that that's something similar to what Chileans will see. Are we able to forecast based on this data? And the answer is, of course, we are. We can look at, so we're going to go back and look at the volumes exported from Chile. And I want to complement this with information that was just released. It was published today. It's an updated export estimation for Chilean blueberries. And they're expecting to get up to 80,000 tons. And if you don't read Spanish, I'm sure this will come out in English tomorrow. But in the meantime, this is the best available information. So 80,000 tons, as we come down here, would mean an 8.5 volume, 8.5% less volume than last year. So then we can look at this information. All right, so this is the curve. And these are the closed exports. And what we want to do is compare these 2 years. So I actually ran the numbers and I took the first part of the curve and said, all right, what if the first week of the year, Chilean exports jump up to the same level that they were last year, and then they follow the curve the rest of the year? What would that look like? What would the total be for the entire Chilean season? And that ended up being actually 6% lower than what we did last year. So if we took the first part of the curve and then say week 1, the red line jumps up here and just follows this curve the rest of the way, then the entire season would be 6% lower than last year. We're expecting 8% lower. So I don't think it's jumped up that quickly. So there's probably like a phase as these two lines come together. But the general expectation based on this article and this curve is that the beginning of the season is going to be shorter than usual, which again goes into the market pressures that Chile's been seeing and the role of Peru historically, as well as the trend, not necessarily this year. And then I would expect these curves to be closer to each other this year for the rest of the season. Who knows what will actually happen? No forecast is accurate. Hopefully, some are useful. But based on the information that's available, that would be my expectation of what's going to happen. And then you have to look at what's going on in the US to see how that's going to play out. I kind of talked a bit about that in one of my last videos. And that's something that I'd have to look at in a different video. In the meantime, we're getting very, very ready for Fruit Logistica. If you're a global trade data client, I've reached out to you and I'd be very happy to show you any of this information at the trade show. If you're not a global trade data client, you're going to get this a month late. So it's a little bit too late to set this up, but reach out, speak to us anyway, and we'll be more than happy to talk to you about the data that we have available in the service. All right. Thank you very much. That's going to be it for this one.